So do you want to learn how to edit videos, but you don't want to watch tutorials that are like 7 to 8 hours long? Then this series is for you. In this two-part series, we're going to be covering the basics of video editing and everything else you're going to need to know to hit the ground running. So without any hesitation, let's get right into the video. So before we start with the actual editing, we actually have to pick an NLE software or a non-linear editing software. If you're looking at content creation or video editing, you've probably wondered what software you're going to be using. And for most independent creators like myself, there's really only 4 options: Vegas Pro, Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, and Avid Media Composer. Picking from these 3 options will really depend on you as an editor. If you're a beginner just looking to break into the editing scene, then Vegas and DaVinci Resolve will be perfect for you. If you're someone that's versed in editing or video compositing, and you already know your way around other tools like After Effects, then Premiere Pro or Avid would be perfect for you. But in this tutorial series, we're going to be using Vegas Pro, developed by a company called Magix. Reason being, it's a pretty popular tool amongst independent video editors, and even though it's beginner friendly and it has a very easy to understand interface, don't let its simplicity fool you, it's incredibly powerful. So let's hop into Vegas Pro where we can start editing. So when you open Vegas, it's probably going to look similar to this. And the first thing you want to do before just hopping into actually cutting and compositing your clips is to understand the interface you're looking at. This may be daunting for beginners, but trust me, it's actually way more easier than you think. So the first and most important part of the interface is the timeline area, which is this area over here. The timeline is where you would add your video and audio clips so that you can actually start editing your video. And this little playhead over here represents the timestamp of where you are in your video. So as you can see right now, we're on 16 seconds, and if I hit play, well, the playhead would move. You can navigate the timeline with tools that are found either at the bottom section of the screen, or you can use these tools here in the program preview monitor. Talking about the preview monitor, that's going to be our next important section over here. This black screen is where your video is going to be displayed. So wherever the playhead is on the timeline, that will be displayed here in this black box. You can control the playback of your video with these controls and buttons over here. Underneath the preview, you can see that we have some settings and information displayed over here, such as the resolution of your video, the frame that you're on, and the FPS that your track is set at. The third and final part of our interface is this section over here. As you can see, we're currently on the Project Media tab, but we can switch to the Explorer, Transitions, Video Effects, and Media Generator tabs as well. In this top left section over here is where you'll find your project media, such as your footage that you've imported into Vegas, as well as any video effects, transitions, and templates that Vegas Pro offers. These compartments of the user interface are called windows, and if you don't see a particular window that we've just covered, don't worry, all you have to do is go to View, Window, and now you can choose them from here. For example, I will disable the video preview tab, and now you can see it's no more with us. But if we go back to the view tab, back to window, and then hit video preview again, then it pops back into the interface. What's cool about non-linear editing programs like Vegas and Premiere is that if you don't like the interface, you can actually change and manipulate it. Simply hover between the actual compartments and you can drag your mouse to make certain compartments bigger or smaller. You can also do this to the timeline to make your timeline easier to see and make it bigger, or make it smaller. If you would like to change where a window is, simply drag on the name of the window and now you can move it wherever you want it to be. To re-dock it into its place, simply drag it to an area that you'd like it to be, hold Control, and now let go, and it's docked back into place. If you would like a custom layout so that you don't have to keep editing it every time you hop into Vegas, you can head over to View, Window Layouts, and then say Save Layout As. You can then rename the layout, hit OK, and this layout is saved as a custom layout. What's cool about Vegas is that it has custom layouts for the different aspects of video editing. So head over to the View tab, back into Window Layouts, and you've got 7 custom presets for the different stages of video editing. We'll get into what all these mean in just a sec, but just to demonstrate what these layouts offer, if you head over to the color correction tab, you can see we're presented with color grading tools for that stage of the editing process. For this video, I'm going to be sticking with the default layout of Vegas Pro 18, just so you don't get confused. Just a disclaimer, I'm going to be using Vegas Pro 18 for this tutorial, but don't worry, Vegas Pro 13 to Vegas Pro 20 is basically the same in terms of its interface, so it shouldn't be a problem to follow along. And using Vegas Pro 18 is just my personal preference. So let's actually get into some editing. Now the first thing you want to learn is how to actually import your clips into Vegas Pro. To import your clips is to simply bring in your footage from your local hard drive into Vegas. To do this, head over to the File section, Import, Media, and then you can pick files from your device. I've just downloaded some stock footage here from my desktop, and as you can see, when we import it and we head over to the Project Media tab, the clip that we imported is right over here. Now, your footage is no use just sitting in the Project Media tab. To actually bring it into the timeline, simply drag it over and drop it into your timeline. If it's your first time adding media, you'll be prompted with this dialog box over here. This dialog box is simply asking you if you want to change the settings from your preview window to match the settings of your footage. However, our timeline is already set to 1920 by 1080, which is the default resolution for video. So I'm just going to hit no because these current settings are just fine. But if you would like to change the settings of your preview, head over to the File tab, click Properties, and then you can change the resolution of your project. The project property window is pretty helpful because you can change things like the project resolution, FPS, and even the render quality. My personal advice would always be to pick the FPS of the footage, in this case 30 FPS. Head over to the full resolution rendering quality and change that from good to best so that when you render your video, it's at the highest possible quality. And then head over to resampling mode and change that to disable. Hit apply, then hit OK. And now we can start editing. Now you'll notice that as soon as we put our footage into our timeline starts to look a little different. It's no more just a gray block. You can see that we have two new tracks, a video track highlighted in blue and an audio track highlighted in red. If you would like to change the color of your tracks, simply right click, head over to track display color, and you can change the color of the track. Of course, this is just personal preference. So I'm going to move our clip to the beginning of the timeline, and if we hit enter and play that back, you can see we've successfully imported our clips into our timeline. So before we get into actually cutting the clips and editing it, a good thing to know is that if you right click on the video track or the audio track, you're presented with a bunch of actions. There are a lot of options, but we're just going to be learning the basics for now. Cutting and copying is pretty self-explanatory. If you cut the clip, it'll be removed from your timeline until you paste it back in again by hitting Ctrl V. You could also delete the clip from your timeline by hitting right click and delete, or you can move your playhead to a desired part on the timeline, right click and then hit split to actually separate the clip into two parts. To undo an action, simply hit Ctrl Z and it undoes an action automatically. And the last feature we're going to be taking a look at over here is by going to Group and then hitting Remove From. When we hit Remove From, you'll notice that our clips are now separated. You can now move the audio and video tracks independently without having them both joined together. If you would like to rejoin them, simply click on the one, hold Shift and click on the other one, hit right click, go back to Group and then say Create New. Now when we drag this around, we can see that our clips have been joined back together. This can be useful when you have an audio file and a video file that needs to be synced up together, but they're from two different sources, so they're not joined. By hitting Create New, you can join those clips together, and by hitting Remove From, you can separate the clips. There are also shortcuts like hitting U to remove the clip, or selecting both clips and then hitting G to join them together. The next and most important tool when it comes to video editing is the split or cut tool. But we've already went through this by hitting right click and then hitting split. But what most video editors do is simply hit S on their keyboard. Trust me, it saves a lot more time to just hit S instead of right clicking and then hitting split. The split or cut tool is simply your best friend as a video editor. Without it, you could never edit a video. From removing parts of your video that you don't want to dividing your footage into clips, the cut or split tool is essential. A classic way of how to use a split tool is to simply go over to the part of the video that you don't want, hit S, go over to another part of the video, hit S again, click on the middle clip, and then hit delete on your keyboard, and that part of the video is removed. Now when you watch that footage back, when the playhead goes over that part of the video, it's just black. You can then drag the other part of your clip to join the first piece of the footage, so it appears like a perfect jump cut. So another way to edit your clips without using the cut or split tool is by dragging the ends of your video. If you hover over the end of your video, you'll notice that your cursor changes from the normal cursor to what is called the trim event end cursor. If you click and drag outward, your video will become longer and will just create more loops of your video, and if you bring it in and make it shorter, then you're simply shortening and cutting the ends of your clips. You can also do this to the start of the clip and not just the end by simply holding the ends and bringing them in. Always remember that when you create cuts within your footage and you delete the midsection, it creates gaps within your timeline. Always remember to go back and rejoin your clips so that there's no gaps within your timeline. You would have noticed that on our timeline we have these little triangles over here. This area between the first and the last triangle is called the loop region. So everything between the two triangles will be looped in your playback. So to create a loop region, simply hold and drag on your timeline and you will see that we have a blue selection over here. To edit the loop region, simply drag on one of the points and you can make the region either longer or shorter. Now if we hit playback, nothing will actually happen. But if we head over to this button over here called loop playback and select it, you'll notice that our playback region now turns to a dark blue. Now if we watch our video back, take notice of what happens to the cursor. It just goes back to the loop region. It will continue to play that specific part of the video whenever you hit the playback button. If you have multiple clips on your timeline, which you probably will have, and you want your loop region to span out from the first clip to the last clip, simply double click at the top section of the timeline right over here. And when you double click, you can see that the loop region automatically spans from the first clip to the last clip. Now this is extremely important because the loop region is also the rendering region. So all the clips selected within the loop region will be rendered. So make sure that when you're rendering your clips, which we'll look at in part 2 of the series, always make sure that the clips that you want rendered are between the loop region points. We're going to be looking at video effects and transitions in the next video, but something basic that you can do for now is to overlap your clips on the timeline. If you drag a clip and force it into another clip, you'll notice that Vegas automatically creates curves for you. If you hold Alt and scroll, you'll zoom in where the playhead is, and you can get a better view of what Vegas has done. Simply by dragging the two clips together, Vegas has automatically created a transition. And if we watch that back, you can see we have a pretty smooth transition. We don't have any audio here on this clip, but it will also blend your audio as well. Another useful trick is to edit the opacity of your video. To do this, head over to your clip and you'll see this little button-shaped icon on the actual clip. If you hover over it, it'll display the current opacity value of your clip. To change that, simply drag and bring it down. By bringing it down, we're lowering the opacity or increasing the transparency. If we put it all the way down to 0, well, then the clip is completely transparent. And to bring it back to 100, simply drag it back up and now the clip is visible. You can also do this to audio clips by hovering over the icon and changing the gain value. This will adjust the volume of the audio on the clip, but we'll leave this at the default for now. Now what we just did was edit the opacity and volume on the actual clip itself. However, if we decrease the opacity on this clip and then head over to the next clip, we can see that the opacities are not the same. If you would like to change the opacity and volume properties on all the clips, then you would need to change them on the track properties itself. To do that, head over to this part of the timeline where we can actually change the track settings, and if we drag down this slider over here, our opacity changes, but it's on the entire track. Therefore, all the clips are affected by it. This section has some pretty useful tools as well, like the mute, which simply disables that track, or the solo, which simply singles out that track and only displays that track. If you want more options in this section over here, just click this little icon over here, go to Edit Visible Button Set, and now you can choose what buttons you'd like to be displayed under this section over here. I'll hit Show All, then hit OK, and now you can see we've got a lot more options and tools to play with. These tools, such as the track motion, video effects, and motion blur tools, are quite advanced, so we're going to be taking a look at those in the next video. However, it's pretty important to know one of these features, and that is the compositing mode feature, which is this icon over here. If you click it, you're presented with a bunch of compositing modes to pick from. Now, if you don't know what compositing modes are, and if you don't know what these are, it's okay. You really only need to know one, and that is Source Alpha, which is the default compositing mode. Understanding compositing modes are quite essential. Compositing modes, or as they're also known as blending modes, are simply different modes which tell the timeline how to handle a specific clip or track. So for example, when we click on source alpha, we're telling Vegas to handle all of these video clips as a source alpha clip, which as we can see simply just displays the footage as is, which are perfect for most circumstances, but you can get quite creative by using the different blending modes. To demonstrate this, I'll create a new track by right-clicking on an empty space in the timeline, clicking new video track, then I'm going to separate these clips by hitting U, deleting the audio clip, then dragging the one video clip over the first one. So all I've done was put one video track over the other. Now if I lower the opacity of the top track, you can see that it revealed the bottom track over here. But to show you how blending modes or compositing modes work, I'm going to head over to the top track, hit the compositing mode feature, and then change it to overlay. Now by hitting overlay on this top track, we've told Vegas to overlay or blend the top track onto the bottom track. I would recommend taking a look at this video over here, where I used Vegas Pro and its compositing modes and I demonstrated how each of them are used. If we scrub through the different compositing modes, we can see that the video by the preview tab starts to change. But we're going to leave it on source alpha just because it's the default mode and the mode you're probably going to be using the most. The final feature we're going to look at in this video is the preview quality feature. If you head over to the preview window and click this button over here, you're presented with 4 options: draft, preview, good, and best. This simply represents the different levels of quality that you can watch your playback in. If you have a really good PC, you can head over to best and full, and it's going to display your preview at the best quality. However, editing at the best quality can sometimes cause performance issues, and that's why some people prefer to head over to draft, go to the lowest, which is draft quarter, and you can see that the quality goes down, but the playback speed and editing experience will be a whole lot smoother. A default setting that I would recommend though is heading over to preview and then hitting auto. This will simply adjust the preview quality automatically so that you can have a smooth editing and playback experience. Now there is so much more to cover in Vegas. For a beginner software, Vegas has so much more to offer, and in part 2 we're going to be taking a look at video effects, transitions, and looking at all the different aspects of the interface so that we can start creating dynamic videos. But for now, understanding things like splitting your clips, trimming them from both sides, adding, deleting, managing, and organizing your video and audio layers are of utmost importance for a beginner. So after you watch this, a great way to start practicing is to bring your footage into Vegas and use these splits and trim tools to organize your clips on a timeline. Play around with the different compositing modes so that you can get an understanding of how each of them work, and start getting used to adding your video and audio clips on video and audio tracks and getting used to that workflow. And that's it for today's video. If you learned something new and enjoyed, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, as well as follow my socials, links in the description below. But up until part 2, I'll see you guys in the next video.